The opinions expressed in this program are not those of CISA 7 or Time Warner Cable.
What's your tomorrow?
Right, I'd like to begin the public engagement session. And we actually have no one here tonight to speak to the board. And so normally we would have a budget overview by Alan Wagner. And just for the public that might be home watching this, that work session, which was held on October 6th, is available for viewing on the television, the cable station. So if you're interested in that, you can catch the overview on television. And at this point, with no one, if anybody has any comments or anything, otherwise I will call for a motion to adjourn. Chris.
Thank you. I apologize I could not be here last week, and I'm sure you went over this. I just want to comment for anyone who sees this to see that revenues were $4 million over expenditures, and this may have been mentioned last time. That's about 1.75% on the entire budget, which is pretty darn small and pretty tight budget if you look at it that way. And I just wanted to make sure that was pointed out to our public.
All right. Anyone else? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Bye. Bye.
All right. The meeting is adjourned.
All right, I'd like to call the budget meeting to order. We have 5 board members present, and I'm joined to my left by Dr. Michelle Langenfeld and members of the cabinet around the table. I'll open this up to you for opening remarks.
Very good, thank you. Tonight's topic, the 2014-15 budget. In the Green Bay area public schools, our mission is to educate each child every day to be college, career, and community ready. And so to that end, when we develop a budget, it's our expectation that we keep that at the forefront of our thinking, certainly. And so we want to serve our students and our families the best we can, and this year certainly was no different as we had that conversation. We also looked at the strategic roadmap as a guide and continue to follow board direction to provide and support programming that affords all of our students a variety of academic, co-curricular programming, and provides them with multiple pathways to success. And in looking back and just some reflection, and it'll be in the budget, you'll see some new opportunities for our students through the Dr. Rosa Manocha Hill, you'll see the Leonardo da Vinci School, for example, and Balick Manufacturing, just to name a few. And I want to also point out the fact that those opportunities for our students were really supported by our community, and there has been a variety of resource and support as we move forward, not only for these different initiatives, but others as well. And we are most grateful to our public who recognizes that schools can't do it alone and provide us additional resource and support. In addition, another strategic direction, obviously, from the board is that we provide a professional learning where we invest in our staff and our district leaders to build capacity so that we engage our teachers and our staff in research evidence-based practice that lead to academic excellence. And so to that end, we have a number of different initiatives where we are actually providing just-in-time supports to our teachers, to our principals, and so forth. You know, we are responsive also to the requirements by state and federal, the mandates that you, I'm sure, have heard a fair amount about: educator effectiveness, smarter balanced assessment, response to intervention. Obviously, we're in process of implementing the Common Core and are responsive to the federal programs, all the various titles, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. 5 is gone, 7 and 9, I think, and then our SAGE program, which is a Student Achievement Guarantee and Education program. And I think the nuance with SAGE is the fact, and it really does affect budget, the fact that you can not support any more than 18 students in a classroom. So what we're finding in some of our settings, for example, is we might have 19 students in 2 sections, or one section, so then we have to make 2 sections, and then we end up adding a full teacher. So now we have a class of 9 and a class of 10, which are extraordinarily wonderful class sizes for some of our students, but at the end of the day, it is an increase in expense to the district as well. And so we try to balance all of that in our programs. I think one of the things that we can really see, and I've been spending a lot of time looking at school finance and having conversations, is the children that are coming to us, many are coming with greater and greater needs. And you start to look at the trajectory, for example, of children who are homeless in our district. And there is a huge impact on that student and their family, but there's also a huge impact on budgetary responsiveness, because through McKinney-Vento, it's basically designed to remove those barriers to learning. And there was a great article just recently in the newspaper about the rising number of homeless students here in the state of Wisconsin as well. Last year, for example, we had in the state of Wisconsin a large number of homeless students, 17,716. And what was interesting to note, if you read the article in the paper, they talked about the fact that they saw an 8% increase last year across the United States, but we saw an increase here in Wisconsin of 14%. So our percentages are almost double what they're seeing across the country in homelessness. And the other piece is we're seeing a large influx of students who come to us living in poverty. Last year alone in the state of Wisconsin, 366,000 kids, and here in Green Bay, 12,083 we served students in poverty. And I think that the piece to keep in mind is the recognition that often students who live in poverty do not have the same opportunities and resources and come to school significantly unprepared, and it's an uphill climb for them academically, which means that we need to provide additional resource and support to those students. So as we look to the budget, you will see some increases, obviously, in some positions to support various student needs, whether it be math and interventionists. You'll see some influx of support for ELL programs, areas around transportation. Obviously, with the McKinney-Vento students, we do transport, and sadly, right now, we're on a record pace for McKinney-Vento. Right now, in our district alone, as of September 30th, 2014, we have 476 homeless students in our district. And across Brown County, we're seeing it in every school district. So we are uniquely positioned to provide extraordinary learning experiences with students who have a growing need and come to us with greater needs than some of our friends. And so as we've been talking about this and thinking, I think as an introduction to the budget process, we had this conversation at Cabinet, and I would offer to you that we have an opportunity to see a very brief video on just how schools are actually funded in the state of Wisconsin, and I think it would be important to just have that ground setting before we move forward. So I'm going to ask Lori if you would to cue that up for us. It was actually a video done that, based on a piece of research by the Forward Institute that really talks about funding in the state of Wisconsin and does a full report identifying some of the key findings. And we're in a unique position, and I think it's really important that our community understand that position and how the funding looks coming to Green Bay Public Schools, but also to every district across the state. I think it sets the stage nicely for the Wisconsin school funding. And as we looked, I would suggest that this year we really struggled. We had some very hard decisions to make in terms of where we would put our resource. And it was very clear we had some very challenging discourse, I think, around the funding and making sure that we provided the best programs we know how for each and every child. And I think the entire cabinet, as we worked through this, really took it extremely seriously. You know, we did well on the state report card. We met expectations, and we continue to work tirelessly. But there does come a point where tough choices have to be made, and class size at what cost and so forth. So it's been a challenging budget, I would say, for us to come forward. But I think we have good bones, and we certainly had good leadership in the process. So Alan, I'm going to turn it over to you at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Langenfeld. We're going to do a brief overview of the budget PowerPoint. And looking at the financial condition of the school district, our financial condition continues to be very good. We had a budget surplus of $4 million at the end of last school year, 13-14. Our fund balance with that additional $4 million is at $45.4 million, and it's at 19.9% of the general fund expenditures. With that fund balance, when we talk about short-term borrowing amounts, back in past years before our fund balance was increased, we had times where we were borrowing $28 million for short-term borrowing to pay the costs. And with that, with the fund balance now at $45.4 million, we have reduced that amount, borrowing amount, to $10 million. And certainly right now, where the interest rates are so low, there's not a big savings there, but I've been here long enough to have those years where we had to short-term borrow for $25 million, and there was quite a bit of interest that the board, we had to budget for because, again, and it really comes from the state funding. Our taxes don't come until January, the 7th month of our school district. The state funding starts in September, the next is December, and so the funding does not go along with the ability for us to pay our bills, and that's why we do have short-term borrowing and do need to have a fund balance. Again, our bond rating is the second highest bond rating, AA1, and again, a lot of that goes along with the fund balance that we have. Every year when we had the referendum in April for the $20 million referendum, I spoke with Moody's. They asked a lot of questions about the district. Some questions about the area around us, which we have no control over. But the one thing they point out every time is that they look at our fund balance and look at the amount that we have there, and that's why we're at the second highest rating. And because of that second highest rating, we are able to get a lower percent on the debt, $3 million. So by having that bond rating, we are certainly saving the taxpayers because the amount of interest is less because of us having a good bond rating. Talk about revenue limits. Revenue limits determines the maximum amount we can raise through state equalized aid and property taxes. For the 14-15 school year, we have a revenue limit increase of $75 per student, which will provide roughly $1.7 million in revenue. And if we looked over the past years, we were back in years where we had $275 increases per student. And this increases were increased based on the Consumer Price Index. And now we certainly have gotten away from that with Act 10, and that the amounts that we are receiving, again, are much less per student than we had in past years. There is also a categorical aid increase of $75 per student in this year's budget, which will provide an additional $1.7 million of additional revenue. For 2014-15, our equalized aid amount will be increasing $4.7 million, and that will allow us to maintain a flat levy. As we look at the equalized aid amount, it really is there only to offset property taxes. The more equalized aid we get, the lower the property tax amount will be. And a lot of that with the equalization aid is based on the property value per student is one of the main factors in there, because if the lower your property value per student is, the more equalized aid you will receive, and the more that can be reduced in your tax levy. For 2014-15, our revenues, we're looking at our revenues of $253.4 million. It's roughly $2 million more than it was last year. If we look at our projected revenues, certainly our state revenues, which includes the equalized aid, is our largest amount of revenue with $160 million. Our property tax revenue, again, that's for the general fund, the debt service fund, and for the community service fund. Our property tax revenue, $66.2 million. Our federal revenue, $22.9 million. A lot of that comes through the federal grants, the Chapter Title I programs, the SAGE program, the flow-through program in special education. Other revenue, again, other areas that are not state, federal, or property tax revenue. Some of that would be Medicaid reimbursements that we get from the Medicaid program, and a lot of miscellaneous revenues and fees, school fees that we charge makes up the other revenue. And again, looking at the revenue sources, our state revenues are 63% of our total budget. Property taxes, 26.1%. Federal is 9%, and then again, the other roughly 2% of our total general fund revenue. If we look at our expenditures for 2014-15, The amount that we have budgeted right now is $255.1 million. And again, that is roughly $2.5 million more than last year's budget. So our budget of expenditures has a 1% increase for 14-15. Again, it's $2.5 million over the 13-14 budget, a 1% increase, or it's also $8.1 million over the 2013-14 actual expenditures, which is roughly 3.3%. So certainly it is a smaller increase in expenditures versus the last couple of years. Again, we're looking at expenditures. Certainly salaries and benefits are the biggest expenditures that we have. $147 million for salaries, $57 million for benefits. And we're roughly close to 80% of our expenditures are salaries and fringe benefits, which is not unusual to most school districts. Purchase services, which includes contracted work when we build our buildings, transportation, garbage pickup, those type of things are the purchase services, roughly $36 million. Our supplies at $9 million. Capital expenditures, which would be mainly our equipment that we purchase, which would be the computers mainly, roughly $4.4 million. And other expenditures rounds out $1.5 million. And looking at expenditures by type, here again you see salaries are 57.5%, benefits are 22.4%, which gets us to 79.9% is salaries and fringe benefits. Purchase services are 14%, and supplies, capital, and other make up the rest of the percentage of expenditures. If we look at the expenditures of the district by program, certainly you can see that instruction is 59.2% of our expenditures, which certainly would make sense. Pupil support is 12%. Operations, which would be the accounting, facilities, those type of areas, are 13.6%. Transportation, 3.5%. If we look at what makes up just the amount of the instructional expenditures, regular instruction makes up 59%, special ed 23.7%, and other special needs, which would be the ELL program, 8.8%. If we look at the proposed tax levy for the 2014-15 school year, we're looking at a general fund levy of $66.2 million, a debt service, which is paying back our referendum debt. We're looking at almost $11 million for debt service, and the Community Service Fund, Fund 80 as we call it, has a levy of $2.7 million. And this would be the first time that the Fund 80 levy will be less than what it has been in the past. We were given an amount that we could levy up to. We used some of our fund balance from previous years in Fund 80, and that is why the Community Service Fund levy has been decreased for this year. In total, we're looking at roughly an $80 million tax levy. And that amount will be no increase from last year. The levy amount will be equal to what it was last year. This will be the third or fourth year that we would have no increase or a reduction in our levies. Our tax levy history, and again, every year we look at when the two-thirds funding happened around 98, where you can see that the tax, can't see it very well. You can see that the debt service is in the yellow, and you see the red is the Fund 80 tax levy. And you can see our levies for the last 4 or 5 years have flattened out, and that's why because we have had an equal amount. Our levy has stayed the same for the last 4 or 5 years. Long-term debt retirement. This would be the debt that's from our previous referendums, and it would also be some debt. Well, they were all from our referendums. We do have that 38 fund debt where, if you remember back when we had the referendum 2 times ago, where we had the 0% interest on there as part of the federal government. So As you can see, our plan over the years working with Barrett is to look at having a reduction every 3 years, because if we want to bring on another referendum, it allows you to keep the long-term debt flat. And so what we try to do is that the debt service levy will remain flat, so there's not big increases or big decreases. And so you can see by looking at that every 3 years we have looked at having a dip in it. So if we would look at a referendum in 2018, for instance, you would have the ability to have additional debt, which not without changing what our tax levy is for the debt service. And it's a strategy we have used for a long time within this district. Our projected tax rate, for the first time in the last 4 years, we were looking at an actual property value increase. It's only a 1% increase in our property values, but it is the first increase in the last 4 to 5 years. Our equalized tax rate will be going down 10 cents per thousand. Our rate will be $10.09. Again, that's a decrease of 10 cents and a 1% total decrease in the tax rate. And again, first time in a long time that the property values have actually had a positive increase. And I would expect that will continue down the road. Our tax rate history.
A number of years ago, it was 6-7% a year, which obviously helps our tax rate.
We look at our equalized tax rate history. Again, when the states funded the 2/3 funding back in '97, our tax rate went down because the state funding reduced the amount of the tax levy that we had. And again, at this point in time, we're fairly consistent on where our tax levy tax rate history is. Other considerations, like every other year, the final equalized aid certification will be coming October 15th. At this point in time, I have made a calculation what I believe that amount is going to be. The final equalized property values, and our final September student count figures. And again, we usually have all of those numbers by the time we do the adoption at the end of October. Budget considerations for next year. There will be some unknowns for next year because there will be a new 2015-17 state biennial budget. And at this point in time, we have no idea what school funding will look like for the next 2 years. And again, as we have done in the past, we will be examining programs and staffing and determining efficiencies. Again, trying to get out ahead of the game by early creation of revenue enhancement and expenditure reduction proposals. We again continue to protect our student programs, which we have been able to do. Again, the budget process for 15-16 will be starting as soon as this one is done. And again, looking for budget approval a little earlier than what has been in the past. And that is the end of my PowerPoint presentation.
All right, thank you, Alan. Next, we'll open it up to board deliberation, so I would entertain questions from the board.
Page by page, is that the best way to do it, or?
Is that how you want to do it?
We have
Sure.
done it that way in the
All right.
past, and it's
Easier to
been,
follow?
Okay.
right.
I'll zip through the map, the fact sheet.
I don't have any issues with the fact sheet or the map. That's
And we'll start, why don't we, page 6 and 7, the revenue pages.
I do like the fact sheet, though. I remember a couple years ago, we asked for that, and Lori, thank you for that. I think you put that together. That's a very excellent, quick capsule of our school district that gives people a good look at what we're doing.
And if I could interrupt too, as we go through this and as you are looking at the budget, again, I would like any input from you as to whether you want to see additional charts, additional information, a different format. So any ideas that you have, I'm certainly am interested for as far as looking towards the next budget.
All right, any questions on 6 or 7? Nope, okay. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
And really, the section that we're looking at, and it kind of goes back to we have 4 funds, and I failed to mention that, 4 funds that we look at for our total expenditures and revenues. And again, it is the general fund, the special education fund, the Head Start fund, and the Indian Ed fund. And those are the 4 instructional programs that we add together to create what our total budget is. Even though we have multiple funds that make that up, which we will look at, but that's how we get to the number of what we pull those 4 funds together to try to come up with what is our instructional budget.
12. I have a question on 12. When you say open enrollment costs, are you referring to the money we pay to the districts?
Correct,
when
an
our
increase
students
in what we
open
have
enroll?
to pay. Yes.
That's the only cost associated with that, the open enrollment? Is that tuition payment? There's no other?
Well, there's also capital projects in the contracted services, but
Right, but when you say open enrollment costs,
it
that's
is the
purely the
$6,300
tuition,
per
right.
student that we have to pay.
Okay.
And again, that is a lot of the students sometimes aren't gone for the whole year, so you're actually paying about 90% of the cost, because there are kids who are not open enrolled, but they may come back, they may go somewhere else. So it's always a prorated of how long the student was an open enrollment student with the district.
Page 13,
I got
go ahead.
a couple on 13, Alan, and my question's written on my old pages, and I don't think it's changed on your new one. On the financial condition, and I think you talked about it in your presentation, that you would like to look for this board adopting a budget in June of next year. What do we do if the state budget is not finalized by that time? I mean, they're supposed to finish their budget by the new fiscal year, which is July 1st, but there have been years in the past where it's gone into September and October. So what do we do if the state budget is up in the air in June?
Well, I think it gets to the point where we want the board to, if we do it earlier, the board has a better chance to have some input on, what programs do we want to continue. I mean, there's no time, the adoption of the budget will always happen in October.
Okay.
So I think it becomes just trying to bring a snapshot of here is where we're from, what we're doing, to have the board say, are we going in the right direction, I think. And again, the farther earlier you do it, the less the accuracy. So what we're going to be looking at, even from an HR standpoint of, here are the positions we currently have, and somewhere need to continue to monitor that of reducing some here or adding some here, and really coming up with an FTE total times a specific salary, where it's not looking at actual people, where when I'm doing the end of the budget, I'm rolling actual people and what benefit they actually have, but trying to get out early enough to make some decisions early enough to, if we're looking to add a program, it doesn't help to be doing that in September. And trying to get those items, a plan out there earlier.
And
for the board.
obviously, if we have the third Friday in September, if we end up having 200 more students that we project, which would be good, we educate every child that walks through the front door, but obviously that has an impact on staffing as well.
Well, and it's happening, and it's beyond the third Friday count. And I think that's a conversation we have to monitor, because we're getting a fair number of students who are coming to us after the third Friday count right now that are not, we will get no money for. On the other hand, we're drilling down, and there are children who have technically never even been in the Green Bay Public Schools. that we are paying out for. So I think the piece, to Alan's point, though, as we look to bringing it to the board in the spring and early summer, is the recognition that we will have some sense and we'll need to probably, in my opinion, ask for more direction in terms of priorities, particularly if there's tight budget or even situation where it's less than ideal and that we would have to maybe support or make tough decisions. We were able to, because of as Alan framed it out early, to address, I think overall, a very, very positive, robust program as we move 14-15. I'm feeling very confident in all the work we're doing, and I think Cabinet would agree. But it gets to that point where it's something to monitor carefully and watch.
And on the second section on revenue limits, and I think you touched on it, and the video touched on it, and I know we've been sending out information to our parents, but I think it's worth stating for the public's benefit. That refers to the 2000 Wisconsin Supreme Court Vincent v. Voigt decision. And that decision upheld the constitutionality of the state funding formula. I said, but the funding formula must take into consideration school districts that have higher than average percentages of higher cost students, such as students whose English is not their first language, special education students, and students living in poverty. And the state's funding formula has not addressed that. State's funding formula treats every student the same. So, and that certainly has an impact on us. The Forward Institute study said that the funding formula is not keeping pace. I mean, despite that fact, we're still fairly healthy in this school district. But I have to tell you that there's a lot of rural poverty in the state, and there's a lot of small school districts that are close to going under that. I don't know how much longer that they can survive unless the funding formula changes. So it's hurting us, it's affecting urban districts, but I can tell you it's affecting a lot of small rural districts as well, and that's unfortunate because if it affects any school district in the state, it affects all of us.
Are you done on 13?
Yes, thank you.
14?
I had some
You had more on 14? Go ahead.
on we talked about the decrease in community service fund. There's a couple of things. I guess for our next meeting, I would like to see a breakdown by program on the amount of money in Fund 80 and the Community Service Fund. I just think that would be helpful, not only for the board, but for the community. We don't break that down by program, the amount of money, and not only the amount of money, but I would like to see the number of students served in those programs, because I think that's critical. And this board has discussed earlier this year, the Department of Public Instruction came out with some directives on what you can include in Fund 80, and would you talk a little bit about that? Because I know staff looked at that and made sure that the programs that we put into Fund 80 followed those guidelines. I don't know if either you or Melissa want to talk about that.
Right now?
Sure. Yeah.
If you said for next time.
No, then for next time, I'd like more of a breakdown by
Okay.
program, but
And I do
think...
have a spreadsheet that would show you that
Okay.
information.
Okay.
This past year, the Department of Public Instruction implemented administrative rules regarding Fund 80. It did not give the line by line, pointing out specific programs that could be included in Fund 80. It did, however, provide more guidance and codified much of the, I guess, how would you say it, the PowerPoints and those sorts of the informal guidance that the DPI had already set forth. And it made clear with respect to fees that the district was charging and talked about proration of salaries and other amounts and salaries and fees and that proration of what could be included and could not be included in Fund 80. That was exactly what the district had been asking the DPI for several years, so that we would have further clarity for proper expenses in Fund 80. We sat down as a team and walked through those expenditures and determined, based on the further clarity that we had requested, what should and should not be in the Fund 80. And given the health of the district's budget, we also determined that we could take out some things that could be put in the general fund.
We did pull out the use of the school buildings. One of the things that was made clear is that there needed to be the ability to make a calculation, that you had the ability to make a determination of what the cost was to the district. And looking at the use of the buildings, certainly there were some that rented the buildings. I mean, that was simple. But when you look at the use of the buildings by Boy Scouts or other groups during the evenings, I mean, we really had no ability to do a calculation that was going to say this is how much utilities that they were using, or so there, without the ability to have direct costs that associated right to it. That was one of the ones we took out of Fund 80, and now those, it's back into the general fund. So there is that increase.
Many districts had done a proration like we had.
Yeah.
Allen had been able to calculate over time the cost of our community partners using our facilities, and we had done a proration. The DPI was very clear that prorations were not permitted under Fund 80.
It had to be a direct cost, and it had to be proven.
And thank you, and I would like to thank the staff for reacting to that, because Fund 80 has been somewhat of a lightning rod in this community, and I know some of our local legislators helped push for those guidelines from DPI, and I think that we're complying with the general guidelines that they set forward, so I'm very comfortable with what we're doing with Fund 80 right now. Thank you, that's it.
All right. 17. And then we've got general fund revenues. We'll look at all those in the 17 one.
Yeah, I just want to point out, I think Alan pointed it out, the equalized aid, $4.7 million. When people see that, they say, boy, you've really got a great increase. But that aid goes directly to reduce the property tax levy, and there's not one dime of that goes into the classroom. So when people see the lump sum money we're getting from the state, it's very healthy, but we're not actually getting that amount of money. We're not getting the $4.7 million. I mean, it's good for taxpayers, but it certainly doesn't help the kids in the classroom.
And we're on general fund revenue, which is through number 21. I did have one question, page 20. There was a 625 under state revenue. There's a high-cost special education aid amount that looks like it's brand new because it's been zero the previous 3 years.
That actually I believe needs to swap with the special education fund. I think I need to pull that out.
What line item are you on?
625 on page 20.
Okay, thank you.
I'm on the source, the
Right.
source column, yeah,
Right.
625.
The high-cost special education aid.
We've always used that money. We've used that money for many years, so I don't know why it shows zero in the past.
The history may be showing up in the special education fund.
So it showed somewhere else one
Somewhere
year,
else.
and now it's showing up here.
It will
Okay.
have no effect by moving it, but
Okay, so it's not new money for
it's not new money.
Okay.
Can I ask a question on 20? Sure. Alan, can you tell me what 349 is? Where you have the zeros? Payments from other districts?
Oh, the tuition from other Wisconsin districts?
No, payments.
Oh,
Payments.
What is it, 349?
349, so right below
Oh, I'm sorry,
tuition.
349. So payments from other districts?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that offhand. I see that we haven't had it for a number of years.
I'm just wondering if it's somewhere else. That's not for the kids open enrolling in at all.
Yeah, the open enrollment would be the line above it. Payments from other districts, I'll have to get you an answer for that.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I just ask a question about 345, the line right above it then? That's a pretty big jump for the tuition for open enrollment.
Well, and again, our open enrollment's out.
But these are revenue.
That's revenue, though.
This is
That's the
revenue.
revenue.
That we're anticipating.
Oh, this is the amount that we are getting from other districts, the $2.4 million.
Okay,
We have
so
had quite an increase in the last couple of years in the open enrollment coming in.
coming in, that was my question, because it is a significant.
Which program is doing a lot of that.
That's good, okay.
So, yes, that would be that's the revenue.
Okay.
And I've got a couple of other Fund 10. A couple other Fund 10 questions. Under expenditures on page 18, 800 operating transfers, 29 million. What's in that category?
Okay, the operating transfer, special education, they have a certain amount of revenue in special education. For instance, it's roughly $15 million of revenue in special ed and roughly, $43 million in expenditures. And what happens is the school district is required to balance that. So in the general fund, there is a transfer to special education to make up the difference between the expenditures in special ed and the revenues. And that amount is a little bit more this year than it has in the past. And that's because they moved Medicaid revenue, they moved some of their Medicaid revenue from the special ed fund to the general fund. So normally the transfer would have been $2 million less, but because the general fund now has the Medicaid revenues, that $2 million in revenue is now, we have to send that to special education because their expenses haven't gone down, but the revenues have. So every year there is that operating transfer, and really it makes the special ed have the same amount of revenue and expense.
Okay, then on page 19, and I think this question came up last year, what is the difference between undifferentiated curriculum and regular curriculum?
Undifferentiated is elementary, where you have students in a classroom, where regular curriculum would be that they have science, math split out. So when we do our budget for elementary, all the costs go into $110,000. We don't have a separate one for, when you get to the regular curriculum, you have math, you have tech ed, you've got all the areas split out separately. I couldn't come up with probably a title of it, but that comes from the DPI handbook.
Yeah, because I think if
Probably
people,
haven't changed it since.
people look at that and they have no idea what that is.
And considering we're pushing differentiation.
Yeah, could we say elementary curriculum?
Secondary curriculum, yeah.
It's just, doesn't help, it's not helpful. And then later in that category, 25,000, business administration, 28 million. What's in that category?
That would be most of my areas, but it would also include the $8 million of transportation. That is part of business administration. It would include all of facilities, all of accounting. So facilities, you're going to have a pretty large amount in there because along with all the staff we have in there, we also have the $4 million every year that we budget in there to do projects across the entire district.
Okay, I'm just wondering if, we have general administration and school building administration. And I know on our summary, our administrative costs are 5.6%, which is below the state average. But I wouldn't want somebody to come along and start adding those together and saying, boy, you've got a lot of administrators. I mean, is there,
Yeah, and
again,
again-
is there another way to
Yeah, well,
say
and
rather
again,
than administration?
these are coming directly, unfortunately, from the DPI as well, but we certainly can make that something more useful for the user to be able to separate that.
Okay, and then on page 20, summer school fees, 295. Why the last year and this year, there are no summer school fees?
We have not had summer school fees, I think, for the second year now. The problem with the fees, well, number one, the problem with the fees is, our first concern was to allow everybody to participate in summer school. The fees could not be more than what the cost of your supplies are for the program. And our revenues were twice the amount of what the supplies were. And so we made a determination to, and there's an audit done, because one of the things we do with summer school is, and I couldn't tell you the math, but we determine how many minutes all of our students attend summer school. And with some magical divider, it comes out to how many FTEs are this many students going to summer school. And that FTE shows up in our revenue limit calculation. We had roughly 473 FTE for summer school. Unfortunately, the DPI, the state only gives us 40%. So it adds really 189 students to our revenue limit. And so with the fees being higher than our supplies, we made the determination that because if our fees are higher than the supplies and they came in and did an audit, they would reduce our FTE. And that's not what you would like to do because it is part of the revenue limit. And our supplies is not a dramatic amount, really. And that's why the fees were pretty steep. But this way, all the students can participate without any cost to the program.
And then under state revenues, I just would like to point out that bilingual aid and high poverty aid, we've had pretty significant increases in students in that category with no increase in revenue. Actually, bilingual aid went up $851, and the high poverty aid is exactly the same. So again,
Now, and the high poverty aid only is for districts who are over 50% free and reduced.
Right.
And that amount, it's every 2 years they change the amount. So I'm hoping maybe we'll see something. But the problem is, and the reason the money is going down is that as more districts hit the 50%, the pool of dollars probably hasn't changed, and of course you'll get less. And that's what we're seeing with bilingual, and the same with special education. Every year our costs go up, the percentage goes down, and the amount seems to be about the same for the revenue. And that's the unfortunate part. You know, even though we have more expenditures, the pool of dollars isn't increasing, and so we kind of hang in the same revenue over and over and over again because there are no additional dollars really put into the SAGE or those. I mean, what's put in there is just keeping people where they are.
One of the challenges and opportunities, and we have added a little bit of staffing in that area and in some management in both special ed and ELL. Speaking with Julie Seefeld, we're up over 4,000 students being served in the regular ELL program, and then she's got, what she said, a little over 1,000 in monitoring status. So about 5,000 students in the district are being served through the English Language Learner Program. And I think that what our opportunity has been, and I've shared this with some, is that we've had a fairly significant influx of new-to-the-country students now coming from other countries that aren't typical for us, Somalia. And so as a result of that, many of these children have never even been in formal school, or they've coming out of refugee camps. So the learning curve for a lot of these kids is going to be very, very large. And so we need to add more resource and support for those students so that they are successful in our schools as well. And that's why this kind of funding is very, very challenging. And we're seeing that growing needs with our special needs populations as well.
I'm done.
Okay. Let's see, we've got page 22, and then we have the Fund 10 detailed expenditures, which goes from 23 to 25, well, there's a chart on 26 and 27. Are there any,
I just had a quick question on 24, line item 200, 310. Under contracted services, the first line item is contracted services, and I'm just wondering if you could elaborate on what those contracted services might be, please?
Some of the contracted services, we may use it for bringing speakers in. We may use it for in the facilities area.
CISA services.
CISA services are extended.
Anything that we, the garbage pickup, anything that we contract out to an outside vendor.
Okay.
Some of it even is in the athletics. We have 310s to pay for our referees, those type of costs. So it really goes all the way across the gamut of different costs for purchase services.
Okay. Thank you.
Staff development is in there.
Would that be other than professional learning? Or?
Software maintenance is in there. I'm just trying to think of the other 300s. The amounts that we that would not be there. I could send you a better list if you would like.
Yeah, it was the first line. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
If you look at the same page, I noticed something, Ellen, that I think is very intentional. If you look at workbooks under non-capital, and the workbook says last year 790,884, and now it's 500. But if you look down to textbooks,
right,
you see a very different number. And I don't know if somebody from teaching and learning can speak to that switch or what that. It looks like you just shifted dollars to a different account. Is that accurate, or does it reflect technology and resource? Or?
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know that there was a conversation around that. I'd have to look at the specifics, though, to be able to comment. I don't know, Alan, if you recall any of the specific line items?
I do not.
No, not for the workbooks. I think one of the things that we're seeing from a resource standpoint from teaching and learning is really the access to open documents that are out there on, online and on the internet. So over time, you're going to see less in that budget aspect as it comes to the, the hard copy textbooks and more maybe print or, different resources that way, or online subscriptions is another one that you're going to see that are going to come more available, as well as the publishers get up to speed with Common Core and other resources as well.
well, I think if this number is low, it's workbooks are consumable, so then that becomes a yearly cost as opposed to the textbooks or online textbooks and those kinds of things are not yearly costs. So I think that's was part of a conversation at one point with workbooks or not workbooks.
Well, if we bought textbooks that had workbooks with them, they may just have both been
grouped
under
textbooks.
textbooks. So we'll take a look at that.
No, I'm glad it's there because I think we've moved well beyond workbooks.
That's a good direction to go in.
And I would like to see, and I would expect that in textbooks I would wonder what the technology supports and resource is in that budget too as well, because I would guess a lot of it is electronic.
And then I had a question on 200-431. There's a significant drop in audiovisual purchases, and I'm wondering what.
Part of the audio, the Common School Fund is roughly $1 million that we receive for libraries. and it's only for certain objects. In fact, it's only for objects that have a 430 in it, so it's audiovisual purchases, library books, student newspapers, periodicals, student software, library computer software, and student reference materials. So I will get a budget for that area for $1 million because that's what the revenue usually is. And I think this year, I think they reduced the audiovisual purchases to purchase more of the student computer software. And every year, the money is allocated then across all the schools. There's an allocation for library books for each school. And some years it may be that we do buy the computers for the library, but it really is designated for things only in the library. I don't think they've ever gotten a little bit, purchasing the computers took how many years before they allowed us to use those dollars to buy the computers in the library, and it hasn't changed a whole lot, but that's, all those 430 objects right there have a lot to do with the common school fund.
We had 2 new schools, and so we had to outfit libraries for them.
Then we're to Special Revenue Trust Fund, page 28 and 30. Indian Education Fund, Special Education Fund, we're on Special Education Fund, and I have a question on 41. Does anybody have a question sooner than that?
No.
Okay. There's, I'm looking at the 200,537 building rental, and just pointing that out, that that's a significant drop because of our consolidating programs and opening the Rosa Minoka Hill School, and that should continue to drop over the next 2 years? Or?
Trinity churches are only one left, so.
Are only a rental?
That will be done. So
And that'll be end of the calendar year or school year?
School year.
School year,
So
okay.
we will have no building rental in special ed.
And then 200,370, educational services non-governmental, and there's a big jump in that. I'm wondering I don't know what that is, that fund, and wondering what the cause of the jump is.
Which one?
200,370, called educational services non-governmental.
Bear with me. We have way too many accounts.
He's got all that detail.
I know, he's got the
Is that where we
whole
had to?
You guys used to have that
package.
book, right?
We used to have that book.
get that book, oh gosh. This book sounds better.
And if we had that book, we wouldn't have all these questions. Because we wouldn't have found it. This is much easier to find, yeah. We have other questions.
Part of those dollars, I know some of it is for the Second Chance program. Is that ringing a bell? Do you know? I think these are services that either through the technical college or through the
NWTC?
I'll have to get
Okay,
you an
we
information.
can get back,
Because in the
that's fine.
special ed, it would not necessarily be the 370.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
The second item under contracted services, staff development, big jump in staff development. Is that new staff or new programming where we need more staff development?
Is that teacher?
That was contracted service, or, yes, we have had very little professional learning in the area of special education over the years, and we've budgeted for a certain amount, and we've always gone over that amount and had to rearrange the dollars, so this year we put it where it was meant to be, and so it'll stay about that way moving forward. We haven't added any monies into the special ed, we've just allotted it to the proper places.
Okay. And I think we raised this question last year, 2,341 student travel. I assume that's busing?
Yeah, that's busing.
Why don't we call it busing? It sounds like we're sending the students all over the place on field trips.
But that also has include when they take medical vans to and from school, work experiences and other community-based instruction.
Well, they just call it student transportation rather than travel.
As opposed to travel.
Yeah. Sure.
I mean, there are certain students we have used vans for too,
But if we can call it transportation instead of
travel.
Transportation.
If we
Student transportation is fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because then that gives you the option of using a van or.
Sure.
Saying travel has the flair of going out of the city.
Right, just going on field
Far more
trips.
glamorous than what it is.
Then crossing the city.
Can we try that?
I know. Points for trying, Claudia.
Okay.
All right, then we're to Head Start Program Fund. Debt Service Fund. I think Alan covered that pretty well in our presentation.
And again, you can see the chart on there, the same chart that was on the presentation.
Right. And then Capital Projects Fund. Food Service Fund. Oh, you're back at food service? Okay, go ahead.
I think we got a report last year. We had a significant decrease in the number of meals served because of some student unhappiness with new nutrition guidelines and that. And it's good to see the number of meals are increasing now. I know that last year there was a significant decrease. Is there anybody here that can address that, how we've had that turnaround?
Yeah, would you like to?
Did they settle the great ketchup debacle?
Well, I think some of that comes from the federal guidelines going this way, going back.
Yeah, Kathy, why don't you go over here? Yeah.
Thank you. I guess what I would have to say about that is I think that we did some unique things last year. We tried to do a lot of taste testing. We didn't just put things on the menu without taste testing them with the kids. We got a lot of input not only from students on what they wanted to eat, but also from our staff. We tried to get that input, and I think that's critical for customer service. And I think we really looked at trying some new products. It gets kind of old eating the same thing over and over again, so we tried to bring some new products in, which we'll do every year now. And I think just trying to get some survey results from the students on what they like, what they don't like, and trying to really modify our menus to accommodate that to a degree with what we could do with the federal regulations.
Have we applied for a waiver?
No.
Okay.
We did not apply for the waiver for the whole grain pasta. That's what you're referring to, right? We talked about it and kind of decided that, at first the kids really didn't like it, but now they're used to it. And so why go back? It's so much better nutrition. Okay. And actually, we've been developing a lot of recipes in our bakery. And we had to get away from a lot of the products that we were using because they were not whole grain anymore. And I knew this was coming, and I had been working in my last district on bakery products, whole grain, and we didn't just go whole grain rich, actually. We went 100% whole grain on anything we were making from scratch in our bakery. And actually, we didn't really get too many comments because when you use white whole wheat flour, they don't really tell the difference. And actually, for some of the products, including our desserts, we actually modified all of our recipes. Everything that's made from scratch in our bakery is 100% whole grain, including all of our desserts. And when you use whole grain flour, it actually has a better texture. So I would say that just getting the input from the students, Making sure that you're taste testing food instead of just throwing it on a menu is just really important. And then I think my big focus has been on customer service since I've come here. Even though kids come to school and we do have a high free reduced rate, we still need to really cater to what they like. And I think that we're really working hard on doing that. We developed a couple of committees last year with our food service staff. One is a focus group, which will bring back ideas on what our planning should be for the program. And this year, we've actually also included a menu group to work on new products, coming directly from the kids, because they're right out in the schools.
Good, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for that.
I remember when you presented to the Intra-City Student Council meeting, the students there were very receptive to the idea of being able to weigh in on new offerings.
Yeah, well, we tried beet hummus this year, and actually there were kids that liked that. So it's just trying new things, getting out of that box that we've been in. School lunch can be really different, and I don't think we give kids credit enough for wanting to have healthy food, and I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of kids eat more fresh fruits, vegetables, and also a lot more kids having the whole grain products, and they don't really notice the difference.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on food service? Then we have a trust fund, community service fund. I think it's covered pretty well. And then last page, revenue limit history. And I just have a question, because at the top of this, it says percentage state aid at 66.94. But on page 7, it's 60.9. Is that the difference with that equalized aid number that comes in? Or is that, am I just not comparing apples to apples?
It's not apples to apples. And this is one of the ones I need to change in some way, shape, or format, because it does not actually show all the pieces as well as it should.
It looks like we're getting to 2/3 funding and we're not.
Yeah, that's what I.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're okay. So the real number is the 60.9
Correct.
in actual revenue, and does that 60.9% include that equalized aid that is property tax relief, or is that just the revenue that we actually see?
It's just the general. No, it is the equalized aid.
Okay.
That should be the equalized aid.
Okay.
I will look at that and.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Well, I know this is a huge amount of work goes into this. As you saw tonight, we're already planning for next year, and this is really a one-year project. And we, as a board, many of the things that are in here, we voted on during the course of the year. We've had conversations around. We've had a lot of discussion. And the cabinet also probably has more discussion than we do because they meet more often. but constantly looking for how can we provide for the educational needs of our students as our money gets tighter and tighter and tighter. And I think that this budget does represent the value that we place on providing for all of our students, every student, every day. And so I congratulate the team, everybody at the table, and many others who worked on the budget, and to Alan and his staff for late night hours during this last crunch time, especially. And I don't know if anybody else wants to comment, or Michelle, if you want to.
I think that each year you can see the opportunity and challenge. And I think that that's the piece as we move forward. And I know Mike referenced the next legislative session. It will be an interesting journey to see if we're going to invest in the children in public education across the state of Wisconsin. They are extraordinary young men and women who deserve every opportunity, and it will certainly factor into the well-being of our state. And for all of us who are aging, we need their help. I want to invest well because I want them in my old age and retirement to help me out. So, It's a personal thing. Just saying.
You get to take it more and more personally.
I know. So,
All
but
right, I
anyway.
will entertain a motion to adjourn
So moved.
budget meeting.
No, we don't
Oh,
need to.
we just move into the next
Move
meeting.
to approve.
And we have to approve the budget.
That's right. I'm sorry, I forgot.
One more item.
Oh, yeah. All right, so I will entertain a motion to approve the budget.
So moved.
Second.
Sandy?
Malone?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Franz? Aye. Jeffries?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Blackout?
Aye.
Carried 6-0. And then we have a public engagement session for the, to listen to the community's input on the budget. That will be Monday, October 13th at 6:00 p.m. And then we will have a special board meeting and public hearing to adopt the budget, and that will be Monday, October 27th at 5:30 p.m. Both meetings will be here in the boardroom. And now I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we have about a 2-minute break before our board meeting starts. All right, I'd like to call the, ooh, we're late. The work session to order. And we have 6 board members present. Dr. Michelle Langenfeld is to my left, and we're joined at the table by 2 intercity student council members, Lo-Keen Cheng and
Luli Martinez.
yeah, I know, Luli, and I can't remember your last name.
Martinez.
Martinez. Okay, I don't have to do the hyphenated. They have your whole.
Martinez Cruz, yeah.
Martinez Cruz. All right.
Yeah, don't hold back. Tell them.
And Lo-Keen is our president of Intercity Student Council. He represents Preble, and Luli is from East High School. And we'll start with our open forum, which is a chance for members of the public to speak to the board about any concerns that they might have. And I don't have any papers. Is there anyone who would like to speak before the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to our teaching and learning session. And that'll be facilitated by Katie Maloney.
And actually, we don't have anything scheduled on our agenda.
All right.
So unless there's anything you'd like to bring up at this point, we can
move on.
Gracefully conclude that work session.
So then we'll move on to our organizational support work session. That will be facilitated by Andrew Becker.
Okay, under business and finance, we have no discussion items. Under human resources, we have first third-party contract health and social services policy and procedures rules.
I can speak to that. This is a new policy that Melissa Fialcala drafted. It has been reviewed by the nurses in the district as well as myself. And we determined a need for this because it came to our attention that we have people who are employed by other agencies, or they even may be people self-employed who come in and work with our students. A couple of examples is a staffing service that employs nurses will come in and work with an individual student who has high healthcare needs. And also, we have some social workers that came in last year to work with students from family services. So those would be 2 types of agencies that we would use this policy that would be covered by this policy. The policy itself is fairly brief, but the rule spells out the process that we would use to assure that third-party contractors and social service personnel comply with district policies that we consider important, such as going through a background check, making sure they understand our confidentiality policies. And then there's an attachment whereby the agency would be required to review the policy. We would document the name of the agency, the person coming in, as well as the student being served. We're doing some of this right now because it's come to attention through the nurses that we have people coming in. So I call the agencies, make sure we know who's here, that the nurses are aware of what students are being served, that they talk with the person coming from the agency so that they know who the nurse is, who the resources are in the building. But this would make sure that the policy behind it So we think it's a good practice and so. Melissa, I don't know if you have any-
Just to add, we have also been working with these, mostly the private duty nursing agencies, to get a contract in place as well, defining roles and responsibilities, setting out confidentiality requirements, and as well as liability requirements that need to be spelled out in the relationship with the contract.
Are there any questions?
Well, I just noticed we also make sure that anyone coming into our building has a background check.
That's correct.
The agency itself does the background check, and, for example, the agencies I've contacted are very vigilant about that. And in healthcare, they have to do them every 4 years.
Okay.
So they do that. And of course, they always meet the TB requirements as well, because, healthcare agencies, and so they do.
So if they do the background check every 4 years and we require one every 2?
We require a background check when you're hired, and we do not have a practice of doing background checks on our employees beyond that.
Okay,
Our volunteers are every 2 years.
okay. So these are not our employees, but we're treating them the same as our employees for these particular jobs that they're
issues that are, or items that are outlined in the policy.
Okay. And the background check that the agencies do is the same, is as much in detail as our background checks?
They cover the same entities, for example, state, federal, sexual offender. The question is, how deep do you go when you're checking the local municipalities? And we started to check quite deeply with our employees. So we don't know that they're for sure checking all the local municipalities, because it's a very...
Okay.
But their background checks meet the requirements of healthcare providers under the caregiver background check law.
Okay. Because there was something... Okay. I was just reading on page 1 of the rule. Okay, I thought it meant they had to do our background check, but they don't. Okay. Anything else? Sandy? Oh, no, this is not a vote. And then, sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
Okay, and then if there's no further questions on that, then we'll go forward to the Head Start Director job description.
This is a job description that Terry Williams drafted along with Sally Jansen. And the title of Head Start Director is one that Head Start uses, and I think you're aware of that, because we have to have a person who heads up Head Start. We're requesting that this position now become an administrative position, so that this individual, who now has several schools, over 200 students, I think, she supervises, as well as a large number of staff, that she be now the person who would be an official supervisor. She would evaluate, hire, work with all of her staff. She does some of this right now, but this would recognize her for the work that she's been doing. And she has just received her administrative license, the 51 principal license.
Was she under a teaching contract?
She is. This would become a 12-month position if the board approves it. Right now, she's under a 191-day teaching contract, but she has additional days that she's paid for so that she can accomplish the work that she needs.
And what would Dan's role be going forward?
Dan would continue to supervise all of the Head Start on the west side at Keller and at Southwest High School. So he has quite a large supervision and evaluation cycle right now. He's doing all of the Head Start Learning Center on the east side. Howe has a classroom, Southwest, and all of the Keller. Keller enrollment has grown, so we have added some staff there.
It's still a relatively low population for Head Start, as Head Start goes, on the west side, right, correct?
the west side has a pretty good sized number of classrooms located at Keller, in addition to the southwest. They're a little bit more on the east side, so it's not quite half and half, but there's I'd have to do the math, but about 178 students on the west side and about a little over 200 on the east side.
And just one classroom at Southwest?
Correct.
Other comments or questions? So I have one. Would it be typical of a district with a Head Start program of this size to have a administrative head?
It would be. Terry did some studies about other districts, and this is typically an administrative position. You can kind of tell by, I think, the things that Sally has informed the board about, budget that she oversees and the staff. She thoroughly understands
She's been administrating.
She has been.
She has been.
For many years.
Yeah.
She's very committed to the Head Start program, as you can tell.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Anything else? Then that will be moved forward for next week, and that would conclude the work session.
All right, thank you, Andrew. Now, we do have a closed session tonight. I'll read the motion. Special board meeting closed session has been scheduled for Monday, October 6th, immediately following the adjournment of the special board meeting and work session meetings at the district office building pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary considerations of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where paragraph B applies, which if discussed in public would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data or involved in such problems or investigations, to wit, personnel matters, and pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851G, conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved, to wit, potential litigation matters. The meeting will begin in open session to consider the appropriate motion for a closed session so provided by law.
So moved.
Second.
Sandy?
Linda?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Jeffries? Warren?
Aye.
Franz?
Carried 6-0, and we'll move across the hall.
What's your tomorrow?
For more information or to obtain copies of this program, contact CISA 7 Interactive Learning Services at 920-465-5218.